there's a lot of different snare drum tuning tutorials up on YouTube, and I guess I just want to add mine into the mix and show you how I do it. I get, I often get compliments, I guess, on my snare drum sound, so I just want to show you how I do it. It's really quick, it's really simple, and it's really effective, and it works on any size snare drum, regardless of what size your drum is, whether you're playing a 14 or 13 or 12 or 10 or whatever. I tune all my snare drums the same way, and I'm always trying to achieve the same sound. Like I like to tune my snare drums to sort of complement the way I play, and I like to get a nice, fat, round pop out of my snare drum. Much the same as popping a balloon with a pin, that kind of nice pop that you get. So I like to get that out of my snare drums, and I found that there's a sort of universal tuning method that's really quick and effective that will allow you to always get that sound, regardless of what size drum that you're playing. And then the other thing is that this method of tuning that I'm going to show you will take advantage of that snare's tuning range, whatever it is. Okay, so you can have that drum sit wherever you want it with minimal adjustments. If you have to make quick ones, this is a really sort of easy way to do it. So let's get right into it. This is the snare that I'm going to be using for this example is just a regular 14 by 4. It's a maple shell snare. It's a 10 lug with die cast hoops. You might notice I got 42 strand snare wires underneath it. You don't need that, okay, to achieve what I'm about to show you. I'm just a big fan of 42 strand snare wires. Again, it kind of complements how I play. I like how sensitive my drum is and how snappy it is with the fatter wires on it. So we're gonna start with this. Use this as my example. And the only thing that you really need to remember to get this sound when you're tuning your snare drum is that it's all about the relationship between the top and the bottom head, okay? As long as you keep that ratio the same with whatever drum you're playing, you'll get this sound out of any drum you want, okay? And I'm actually gonna exclude the cheaper snares. Like sometimes it's a little bit harder to get this type of sound out of the cheaper snares, just because of the quality and the construction and stuff. It's just not the same, okay? If you go out and you get an aftermarket snare from any company from, $200 and up, it's gonna sound awesome. 8 lugs, 10 lugs, doesn't really make a difference, okay? So, here we go. I typically start with the bottom skin, and we got a completely dead snare drum here. We're starting from scratch, okay? So, what you want to sort of remember, to help you to remember how to tune these drums, try to think of a 1 to 3 ratio, okay? 1 being the top head and 3 being the bottom. That will basically, it's got nothing to do with number of turns or any of that kind of thing. 1 to 3 ratio just sort of helps you to remember to keep the bottom head tight and the top head much looser. That's all you really need to remember, okay? And I'll show you how that works. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the bottom head. Okay, it basically starts now. The other thing that I really wanted to mention, I mentioned before that it was quick. I'm talking real quick. You're gonna be able to get this perfect sound out of your snare drum in less than 2 minutes, okay? I'm gonna talk about it first, and then I'm gonna actually do it, and then you'll see, just how fast it is. So what I do is I start with the bottom head. I tune the bottom head fairly tight. Okay, I don't choke it, but I tune it pretty high and pretty tight. Okay, and then I flip it over, and then I do the top head. When I do the top head, the tension on the top head is at least half of what the bottom one is. Okay, you keep that ratio the same, and you'll get that perfect snare drum sound that you're looking for. Okay, so let's start this demonstration now. First thing that you're going to need is 2 drum keys. I always use 2 drum keys when I'm tuning my snares. I don't need 2 for my toms because there's a different method that I use for my toms. But for snare drums, I always use 2 drum keys. And the reason I do that is because with snares especially, it's sort of essential that all of these are the same tension. Okay? Otherwise you'll have overtones fighting against each other. And it just, the snare drum itself will be sort of out of harmony with itself. Okay, so when you use 2 drum keys, it basically just ensures that they're all going to be relatively even. And what I do is I put one on one end, one on the opposite end, and turn them both at the same time. It's just easier that way. It's quicker that way too. Okay, so the first thing I do is I loosen everything off. And I go around the drum and make sure everything is finger tight. This has already been checked, so I know these are all finger tight. So I start them all finger tight. I'll even go as far as turning both keys in the same direction, because I'm turning them at the same time. That kind of helps me to sort of know that they're all going to be, when I'm turning the 2 of them, I know they're both going to be turned at the same tension. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Start with that one, and I'm gonna turn them and tune them right up. Okay? Don't be afraid to turn these, but also, you want to just turn them until common sense tells you to stop. Like, you don't want to strip anything or anything like that, but you can turn these things fairly high without really worrying about it. Okay? One thing to remember, if you didn't already know, the tighter your bottom skin is, the more sensitive your snare wires will be. So if you're the kind of drummer that does a lot of ghost notes and stuff like that, and you really want them to come out, a tight resonant head will sort of help achieve that. Okay. So I went around the drum, and there's no real method to doing this. I'm just going by feel. I know just from turning these that all these now are relatively the same tension. Now with the bottom head real tight like this, you flip it over, do the top. The top head now is completely loose. This thing these lugs aren't even, they're all loose. And I'm still getting somewhat of a fat sort of sound out of this. And look at this, there's wrinkles all over the place. This thing is barely sitting on the head. And I'm still getting. Get a sort of nice fat 70s funk sound, and the head's not even tuned at all. Like, it's just sitting on there. Like the tension rods haven't even been tightened yet. So if you're starting from that point, you can imagine how much better it's going to get just with a couple of turns. And it's all because that bottom head is nice and tight. Now, to get that fat sort of round bodied, full bodied pop out of this thing, all you really have to do now is do the same thing on the top, 2 keys, put one across from each other, give them a turn, and again, no real rhyme or reason to it. Just give them a couple of turns and tighten it up a little bit. And from here, you're really just tuning it to your liking. You're going to take advantage of the full range of this snare by doing it this way. Okay, there's literally no guesswork, really. It's all, you're doing the whole thing by feel, okay? And, you know, that sound that you heard coming out of this snare before, like there's no way that you would have been able to tell that it's a 14x4 shell. Like that was a really nice fat sound. So I went all the way around it. That's probably, I don't know, might have been a full turn and a half, I have no idea. But you can hear now. Okay, that for me is great. If I wanted to tune it higher, I could. If I wanted to tune it lower, I could. But the consistency of that pop will stay there. As long as I leave the bottom head tight, I can put the top head wherever I want and take full advantage of that tuning range, okay? And, you know, like if I wanted to back it off and get something a little bit fatter out of it, I can do that too. Like I recently played a Stevie Ray Vaughan tribute show with a band called Cold Shot. There's a lot of Stevie Ray Vaughan and you know, there's some Hendrix in there and stuff like that. And I used this snare. And you wouldn't think by the size of it that it would be appropriate for that kind of gig. But I just felt like using it. I dropped the tuning a little bit, and it worked great. Okay, so that's a low tuning. Now, I generally like to play my snares wide open, but if you wanted to add some muffling, you know, you could do that as well. Just help tighten it up. Okay. Muffling, no muffling, doesn't make any difference. The only important thing is keeping that ratio the same. Okay, think 1 to 3. Top head is loose, bottom head is real tight. As long as you remember that, you can tune any snare of any size that way and take full advantage of the tuning range of that snare, okay? So that's about it, that's the demonstration. You know, you've heard what this thing can do with this sort of tuning method with no tension at all on the top head. I mean, you can get yourself through a funk gig, no problem. The only thing that that you might want to keep in mind, I guess, because like if you decide to do it this way, and it depends on the quality of the snare, but sometimes with the top head, the tension that loose, sometimes what can happen is where you're playing it, the tension rods will come a little bit loose on you. You find maybe by the third song that the tension rods generally around where you hit it with the stick are a little bit loose. That's a really simple solution. You can go to just your local drum shop and get these things called lug locks. Lug locks are just these little plastic things that you snap on top of the tension rod, right on top there, and it just prevents the lug or the tension rod from tuning or turning like while you're playing. So just pop a couple of lug locks on there and you won't have a problem. But yeah, that's about it. That took me less than 2 minutes to do, okay? It's a really valuable thing if you're at a festival or something and you know you show up at these things, the backline kit is always out of shape, always sounds like crap. It always needs retuning, but you don't have a whole lot of time to do it. You can grab a snare and tune it up to your liking in less than 2 minutes, and you're good to go. Okay? So yeah, that's it. Just remember that. Try it out. Grab a snare now if you want, and try it out. Loosen everything off. Bottom head nice and tight. Top head, tune it wherever you want. Give it a whack if you like it. Cool. Okay, so that's my method. Give it a shot. Hope it works for you. And that's about it. Peace.